I am very happy to welcome Peter Warman. He's a co-founder and CEO of Newzoo. Newzoo is a leading market research company for the video game ecosystem. And Peter will give us a deep analysis of the current situation of the video game market, and especially the position of Europe within this market. He will also share with us his wisdom about a possible European future. So be ready for a very inspiring keynote. Thank you very much, Peter, for being here. And the stage is yours.
Odile, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you very much also to have given me the opportunity to think a little bit deeper than normal about Europe and Europe's opportunities in gaming. Because, you know, running a market intelligence firm of 100 people that's at the center of the games business can be pretty busy. But I spent some time giving this some thought, and hopefully that will be reflected in my story today. It's a big responsibility to sort of set up the framework for a big day as today. There's a lot of content in my presentation, but don't worry, afterwards, I think everybody that's listening will receive it. First of all, the timing of today, it couldn't have been better. You know, there's something very big going on in gaming, something very big. I'll just give you some examples. The fact that just recently, NVIDIA, which in principle has made its money by making gaming hardware, is acquiring ARM, European chip manufacturer, tech provider for Apple, etc. They are buying that company. And at the same time, you see Epic Games, the publisher of Fortnite, in sort of a battle with Apple and Google about the cost of distribution. And it seems that they're actually succeeding in getting the 30% share that they take from developers down to 15. Huge, big battles. But a games company like Epic being confident enough to battle that out. And also recently, Microsoft in the US, not known as a games company particularly, but a games studio, a publisher, ZeniMax, that has the famous studio Bethesda in it for $7 billion. Something big is going on when these big companies are moving in such a big way. Just looking at what Microsoft is buying when they buy a studio like that. Are they buying a studio? Are they buying a developer? I don't think so. I think there's a lot more to it. For that money, there must be a lot more to it. You know, they're buying into communities because these huge IPs that they own, these huge games business that they own, have communities around it that are very strong. For instance, on Reddit, the biggest social community for the core gamer groups, have around 2 million subscribers across all titles. So they're buying into a community of 2 million. And that community is very active. They have more than 7,000 comments going on every day. And that's something unique for games. It's not just the experience, it's being part of the community and talking with each other about this IP. And gaming used to be about gaming itself, but Microsoft is buying into the fact that even a single game like Elder Scrolls has 120,000 hours streamed in the past month, I believe, past months. So they're buying into much more than just the IP in the game itself. I think that's an important thing to realize. And today I want to focus on broadening our view out so we can better identify the opportunities for Europe. And just a personal note, of course, Doom was my favorite game back in 1994. So they're buying into IP that could appeal to older people like myself who could come back into games. You could see with the flags that most of the acquisitions, the big movers, are American. And I was thinking about that, and I realized, you know, we as a European company, also when we set out for investment, we have ended up with an American company, Advanced Media, who owns nice brands like Vogue, but also Discovery Channel, and is investor in Reddit and all kinds of big things, but a traditional media house. So how did we end up with a company that's based in the Freedom Tower in New York? You know, why didn't we get funding from a European entity? I thought it was a good question. It also raises another question, which I think is a hot topic for today. We consider ourselves part of the games business, very much at the center, actually, but we don't develop games. We're a B2B provider of services in good European tradition. Because I think we should think about the strengths of Europe today and not only focus on the weaknesses and try to fix them. If we focus only on the weaknesses, it's going to take too long to catch up. And at that moment in time, the world would look different, I think. So one of the strengths is indeed the business-to-business services. It's more in the European culture to start a business with a little less risk and end up with a healthy business-to-business company, like myself, actually. Something to keep in mind as we move on. But I want to paint a bit of perspective first in terms of time, and then look at the consumer side, the market side, and then focus on the business side, the industry itself. And hopefully we'll be able to end up with a couple ideas on where Europe stands and where we can go going forward. In terms of perspective, if we look back in time, let's say in 2002, only 18 years ago, there were around 600 million people playing around 2 hours a week on average. That's a total 60 billion hours. And they spent playing games around $20 billion, that is. And talking about entertainment value, the value per hour was approximately 33 cents. This is a way to look at the value that we're creating or the value that we're bringing to consumers. What has happened in 18 years' time is almost unbelievable. And the growth doesn't come from a single metric. It comes from the combination, because there's 2.7 billion people playing games nowadays, or enjoying games, I must say, for an average of 5 hours a week. So that's 2.5 times more. In the end, that calculates up to 12.5 times more time being spent on games on a global scale. And the revenues have gone up almost a factor 9, up to 175 billion, dwarfing other entertainment industries like the box office, but now also bigger than the sports business globally. That stands at 140 billion. And this is consumer-generated revenues alone. This does not take into account all the ad revenues generated in and around games. And you can see that for the consumers, enjoying games has actually become cheaper. Only 23 cents an hour, but very comparable to the situation we were. So we have been very successful in gaining more engagement and converting that into money, but in a very democratic way, you could say, or a very nice way, because the consumers are paying a little less for the hours that they enjoy games. So how has this happened? This huge jump in success. And if you look back to the history of games, there's always a big step innovation or big change every 5 years. And every 5 years, that innovation has doubled the time that people could spend on games. Now, first, we moved games, gave them online access, giving all kinds of new possibilities of playing together and updating games and everything. Then 5 years later, in 2007, the iPhone was launched, and playing on mobile became a way bigger thing, and you could play everywhere. So because you could play everywhere and didn't have to stay home, it doubled the time in engagement. And then what the industry innovated is, how can we grab more time? You know what? Let's make all the games free so everybody can play and spend more time, and then we'll figure out how to monetize that afterwards. And at that moment, the time spent on games doubled. More recently, we've seen social activity on Reddit and YouTube and Twitch boom tremendously. Once again, doubling the time in engagement, but this time not lean forward playing the games, but leaning back, watching the games. And I think going forward, there's not a lot of degrees of freedom that games still have to grab more engagement. One main thing that a lot of games companies are focusing on now is ensuring people are lifetime gamers. That people don't drop off being a gamer when they're 30 or 35 or 40, but they enjoy game IP, maybe in different ways, their whole life. It can be in terms of movies, it can be watching esports. That's another degree of freedom that will double the engagement that gaming gets. And I think after that, there's not a lot left. And I think that after that, we'll see game mechanics enter and be integrated into all kinds of other services that we have and experiences that we have. And below that, of course, is this tremendous stream of new business rules that games set and new technologies that are implemented. And on top of that, which will make the impact even bigger in a couple of years, is the fact that the people that have grown up with all these changes in engagement and business models are still only coming into the industry in a couple of years from now. And at that moment, they will change how other markets operate in terms of consumer services. I'm convinced about that. Because this is the birth of, say, Games 2.0, and the maturity phase is still to come. And I think Europe should prepare for that. And all the hyped trends like virtual reality and esports and cloud gaming and 5G, those are not the trends. Those are just buzzwords on top of the bigger thread of changes and disruptions that we're going through and initiating as a games business. So something big is going on, but we have to realize that we might have to think broader and bigger today and longer term, because the future of games and its company is not particularly games itself. It is impacting other markets across the globe in different ways. And if we think that way, we might have some new innovative avenues to invest in as financial companies or funding institutions. Let's look at the consumer side of things, the market for a minute. Games is not a normal medium like others. Games is not even special because it's interactive. Games is special and has been so successful because it provides consumers with the feeling of being empowered. You can go into Minecraft, create your own game. You can set up a tournament, an esports tournament with your friends. You can even build your own PC. You can stream your game and earn money. You can give money voluntarily to streamers. All this power, that is the magic of games. So games is the most empowering form of entertainment. Let's realize that as the core of the success. And over time, it used to be you had a game here, people would play, some hardware, you would own a cool gaming PC, and then there was video, you would watch some YouTube videos. But this has all evolved and been surrounded by tools allowing consumers to proactively do things. And in that whole evolution, these areas have started to overlap. And I would suggest not forgetting hardware here. Hardware is part of the fun, part of ownership, part of enjoying the whole gaming experience. And I think we should look at the market in that way as well. And that is exactly what we do as Newzoo. We feel responsible to take away barriers in the market for the market to grow. And we saw a lot of companies just talking about core gamers and casual gamers, male, console, female, mobile. That is no longer the case. That has changed 10 years ago. And we take into account how passionate people are about merchandise, about hardware, how much people like to watch over the shoulder of their kids or watch esports themselves or participate in competitions, but also gaming. There's a lot more variety in how people enjoy gaming. And what we as Newzoo try to do is provide the market with a smart way of looking at this, potentially identifying new target groups and the future. Of course, all these personas have been hit by the pandemic. And we all know that gaming is not the industry that has been hurt the most. We even had to upgrade our estimate of the market for this year with $16 billion. And the time spent on games has almost doubled during this period. And you can see a couple of facts here. But what I find additionally interesting is that certain games do better in a time of a pandemic than others. And this is a little bit old data, but this is Fall Guys, and now it's Among Us, two games that have risen to the complete top because they have certain characteristics that fit with the pandemic. And that has to do with the social interaction. Because we research why people are spending more time during the pandemic. And it's not just that they have more time. It's because they see games as a starting point for their social activities. You can see here the second biggest reason is gaming for me is a means to socialize. I can go in, I can speak to my friends, and I can play with my friends, do something that I normally would do outside, for instance. So games realize that they are often the starting point for the youngsters going online and for all gamers to socialize. If you take that into account, Among Us, which currently is probably one of the hottest games in the whole world, has the same amount of daily active users as Netflix. This is how big it is. If there are people in the European Union or in big companies outside of games that don't think games is big or impactful, these type of facts can help. It's also not surprising that Fortnite, owned by Epic Games, who acquired a video chat tool some years ago, is integrating it now quickly into Fortnite, enabling even richer communication among its community. And whenever you want to, talking about game communities, you cannot forget about Discord, the communication tool for gamers with 250 million registered users and about the same active as Netflix and Among Us. This is how big it is, but this is an aspect of games that is equally important to the experience, the competitive experience when you start to play. Another COVID thing that we have seen is that gaming, through its success, feels very responsible to do good, to give something back. And if you combine that with the fact that gaming provides tools for people to do stuff, you get a lot of initiatives by streamers, by game communities to help others. So games are a platform for charity, and games are an inspiration for other platforms to innovate. It was only during the pandemic that Spotify finally allowed their users to contribute money to their favorite bands, just voluntarily, something that's been around in games for years and years and is a normal situation. I think Spotify is a nice example talking about Europe. Spotify is probably the exception of creating sort of a unicorn outside of the US and China. And I'm happy to see that they're adopting game mechanics now to take it to the next level. The ultimate result of all this consumer activity is money. It's only half of the gamers worldwide ever spend money on games, but if they do it well. So this is the global situation, and I won't spend too much time on this. The thing I wanted to do is, how does that look for the European Union? And this is the European Union without the UK, indeed. This presentation forced us for the first time to slice and dice it on the new situation of the European Union. So we are a trade zone that generates $23 billion in consumer revenues, which is 30% of the global business. And we expect that to grow on a healthy growth rate towards 30 billion around 2023. So we in the world, I think, are the fourth trade zone, you could say, in the world, or the third. China 44 billion, US 41 billion, and we are at 23. You can see, if you compare it to global, we are a more traditional market, less mobile, more than a quarter, but the success of consoles remains the same, and more than half of the money is generated there. That was some background around the market. Let's look at the time. Okay, we're good. Now let's look at the industry side. So the market, we represent 30% of the world. Okay, that's interesting. Let's remember that. So how empowered is our business here in Europe? How are we doing in innovation and converting engagement in time into money? And the background is similar to the evolution of on the consumer side, is that different types of companies over time have evolved into one, because you cannot really speak of a developer and a publisher anymore. Just like you can't speak of a gamer anymore. All these terminologies, these are old. You know, a developer has now runs games as a service. It's a game operator requiring a different organization, different business models, and perhaps also different funding mechanics. Publishers see themselves as entertainment companies. They see themselves responsible for streams on Twitch, in addition to their games itself. And they're becoming very ambitious to be the bigger game entertainment companies in the world. Just look at Epic Games going to battle with Apple. And gamers, because they enjoy viewing and other things, you can better call them game enthusiasts. And the mix of how they enjoy games is different for any segment. So you can see when it comes to the financial side, and these are all pretty old examples actually, but very typical, that traditional broadcasters, telecom giants, and entertainment companies are investing into games and trying to get a grip on that. So the question is, how does Europe sit in that environment? And in the acceleration that we're going through now, all this attention from the traditional space is reflected in some trends that a lot of people talk about. Cloud gaming. Well, cloud gaming you can see in different ways, but a lot of people see it as, you know, a new subscription model, just like Netflix. You buy for $9 a month, you get access to a number of games. So all these traditional companies owning clouds and entertainment IP are jumping on this. And part of this ecosystem are game companies. But what is important here is to realize this subscription business model, it's not an or situation. It's not, I'm going to publish my game, oh, and all these subscription companies are going to own my games. I'm not going to own the contact with my gamer. This is an end situation. This is where you put your game in a subscription and it's sold to a different target group in a different way than you would reach in your normal situation. So this is another example where gaming is just adding new business models, adding new ways of engagement. It's not substituting. And gaming is adding, adding new integrations with traditional sports. During the pandemic, all the sports, the esports, sports franchises, they really boomed and they put in more effort. So whenever we think about investing, we should think about convergence of traditional media, traditional tech, and traditional entertainment like sports. Those are fields where investments are being made now, regardless if it's a game studio or maybe a technology that's behind it. Another thing that's coming up, that as Europe, we need to take a position here, we need to be strong. 5G is being rolled out. And within this whole ecosystem, all these companies are looking at games to be the pioneer in terms of use cases, in terms of subscribers to their services, because games are the most demanding apps that you can imagine. Games will benefit first from 5G. And it's up to our European creativity to develop games and formats that wouldn't have been possible without 5G. All things to take into account. So how are we doing as Europe? If you take public company revenues, so we track 100 public companies and take out their game revenues, and then we look at, okay, where do they earn their money? And where are they based? Where does the money go to? And we know that China, Japan, Korea are relatively closed markets, hard to enter. And that's reflected in these figures of public games companies. Like in China, 93% made by local companies. Japan, 81%. Korea, slightly more open, 56%. Where's Europe? Is Europe playing a part, earning money there? They're the smallest slice in any of these pies. We, as a business, are not very successful in getting money from these territories that are relatively closed. But of course, that's also because all of our studios are bought by companies in China or Japan, US, Korea. How's the situation in Europe itself? Well, the Americas, putting South America, North America together, and the whole EMEA region and the rest of APAC, those are the battlefields, relatively open markets where all the different powerhouses go and battle. And you can see, let's take the EMEA market. that should be closest to us. Only 9% of the revenues generated by consumers in this region goes to European public companies, that is, and 8% in America, and 6% in the rest of APAC. So that's relatively small, actually. So that raises alarm bells. Is there something we need to do about this? This looks like a bad trade balance. So that's the question for today, I guess. And, you know, a big role, the biggest role that a country plays in this whole global scheme is China. I was in China just before the pandemic in Hainan, the global games industry annual conference. I was the only Westerner there, had good food, met all the leaders of Tencent and NetEase and all the others. And their focus is overseas. We know that the Chinese are very big in investing in European studios as well. But as a market, the Chinese have gotten very tired of doing business in Europe. It's very complex, fragmented, multicultural. That's very difficult. So when I sat there, their overseas strategy was focused on US and Japan and Korea. And Europe was not even mentioned. It's a difficult market for them. Maybe that's an opportunity for us. But we have to think what we think about a Tencent investing in almost any European studio that becomes successful. And recent big successes on mobile, I have 3 examples here: Coinmaster, Archero, and Call of Duty. They're both on the forefront of innovation, combining core and casual mechanics, but they're developed by studios outside of Europe. Well, Israel, you could consider Europe, Moon Active with Coinmaster. But what is surprised me is that Archero is developed by a Chinese studio. And Activision Blizzard went for a Chinese studio, Timi, to develop their Call of Duty mobile franchise. That's something to think about. If we're creative in tech business models and engagement, we should be European studios to be asked to develop the Call of Duty mobile franchise. So the Chinese are strong in multiple senses. Where there's a chance for anyone, and I think particularly also for Europe, is all these companies, all these technologies that allow games to be so successful. These are all the different game technologies that are used for the super complex situation that game developers are in, that are operating a live game. And I haven't gone through the effort of identifying the European origin of all these companies, but I can imagine there's quite a lot there. And I feel that if we look at gaming as an investment opportunity or an area where we should help with funding, we should not only look at studios, we should look at technology behind it that facilitates games, and perhaps also the future when games becomes more integrated in other markets with other services. This is an overview of these top 100 public companies I told you about before. And I just filtered out, not European Union particularly, but Europe, European companies. So of the top 100 public companies by game revenues, 14 of them are European, you could say. That's not bad. Remember the 13% of the consumer market? You know, we represent 30% of the global business. So, okay, that looks like a pretty good trade balance. But the rank figures here on the left show you what the issue is. Because if you add up the revenues generated in 2019, 4.2 billion by these companies, it represents 3.8% of the top 100 companies. So we're getting better at creating bigger companies that dare to go public, but they're still stuck below the top 15. What I found encouraging, though, is to see that more recent groups that have been developed that represent multiple studios, such as Stillfront, are doing very, very well. Not only in the pandemic, where their growth is more than 100%, but also before that, last year. Beautiful growth rates, multiple $100 million of revenues. That's very encouraging. And of course, we have some great, brands in here, like Paradox with their niche games, super successful, invested by Tencent. CD Projekt, with their big game coming up in I think a couple of days from now. Some really nice IP in there. If you would put all the European public companies' games revenues together, if we were one single public company, we would be company number 10. We would still be smaller than EA alone. That's how big the difference is in terms of tech giants. What about the long tail? I think we're talking a lot about the studios and the long tail of developers here. So I've been talking with the EDDF, European Game Developer Federation, who represents 13 associations in Europe. And this is the data that they put out in 2018. And now they're aggregating the data for this year. And around 4,000 game studios, and I think that is without the UK, which is still in these graphs, 130 publishers, 60,000 employees. But this is in the game developers, really developing games. This is not about technology around it, platforms, or anything else. It doesn't include Newzoo, for instance. So if this long tail is maybe generates around 2 billion, I think we as an industry generate maybe 6.5 billion within the EU, probably. If we wanted to be representative of our 13% share of the world, we should bump this up threefold. It should be 3 times bigger and therefore create or triple this number of people working in these studios. It should go up with around 100,000. What I'm trying to do here is assist in maybe quantifying the objectives that we can have as Europe. But I'm not really sure, does this trade deficit matter? The fact that we don't have big tech giants, not have a lot of public companies, not have a big tradition of building huge businesses. We as Europeans set out to build a healthy business, not too much risk for the family in terms of entrepreneurship. Is that a bad thing? I'm not sure, especially if you think about the fact that the future of games is not particularly games. There's new avenues. Maybe there's opportunities there. Let's think about our strengths. Recent initiatives that look at gaming as a whole also see gaming as part of it. There's this fund that tracks the performance of stock called NERD, really cool name. Well done, guys. Set up by Jens, European founder of ESL, and some American friends. And you can see that they rely on a combination of hardware, streaming platforms, as well as games. They're taking this new holistic approach. And I think that's the way to go. That's how financial people should see the games business. And we at Newzoo track every investment that's been made in games and share that in our platform to financial institutions as well. In November, we tracked $344 million invested. Hardly anything in studios. It's all around analytics platforms, games tech, streaming formats, social and community platforms and solutions. It's companies like Newzoo, but also ESL, world's biggest esports organizer, world's biggest independent streamer on Twitch. Not public, but a huge asset. Is it considered part of the games business? I do. But does the European Union consider that part of it? Do associations do that? The same for Adyen, payment provider. A huge chunk of their business is games. Do we see them as games business? Not particularly. Should we? Maybe. So I'll try to end it up just in time for a question or two. What might be opportunities for Europe? And I just sneaked in a brief analysis because I hear a lot, Europe is not good in creating IP. We should be better in creating IP like the Americans. Let's be more like Hollywood. I don't agree. We are very good in creating IP. We are more creative than the Americans in creating new formats for games. And that is reflected in this overview. So the blue dots are where the game is thought up, where the game is created. And then the row next to it is who owns that company at this moment. So the fact, and this is just, I think it's last month or a certain period, most popular games on iOS left and Google Play to the right in terms of engagement. we have created 53% of the most popular games on iOS at the moment and 73% on Google Play. We as Europeans as a whole, broad, that includes Russia, Cyprus. But you can see what the issue is, or the issue, what happens is these get bought, and the business owner, there's only 2 companies in the top 15 that are still European in terms of ownership. So this illustrates it. And when a company is successful, here in the right lower corner, like Voodoo from France, with games, when we see they're successful, you look in Crunchbase and you'll see that they're invested in by Tencent. That's how it goes. Is that okay? Is that not okay? I don't know. Do we need to have a European entity that plays that role that Tencent now does for European studios? Perhaps. So I think a couple avenues there. We shouldn't forget we are the best in the world in creating creative new formats, and we should cherish that. We just need to make it easier for companies to convert this into business success. When it comes to funding, we should realize that when a game is made and launched, it's a service. It might take some time to find your sweet spot to earn the money back. We should take it into account. We should think big and in the for the long term. But also education should think about including this knowledge about games as a service and tech and everything in their education. Combining that with the unique creative power that we have as Europeans. Of course, we have no or little unicorns or big tech companies in Europe. And that's a weakness. I don't know how much of a problem it is. But I think we should think bigger. The big new studios from the US, they get funding in their very first or second year of tens of millions. Maybe we need to think a little bit bigger, giving our studios more time to hit success. Give them more support in a different way, take away other barriers that they see. But being realistic, because we Europeans are different, our culture is different. We don't think as a unicorn when we're born. And I think the European opportunity is in tech and services. We love to serve. We love to serve the coolest, best games companies in the world, and we should continue to do so. And the quickest way to success for our industry in Europe is boosting this and realizing this, I believe. And there's an opportunity going forward as tech will disrupt other markets. When talking to people, I actually found out that one of the roadblocks is something that I or my company might be able to solve. There simply is no report or database or anything that reflects in any sense of reality the market of the European Union or the industry. The industry is seen as a narrow studio-based focus. The market is Western Europe or Eastern Europe. And there's no talk about trends, no talk about the broader view. It's also lacking in the US, by the way. They do a better job in China. I think there's an opportunity to create a report, a database frequently updated that informs all the financial institutions in a way that makes sense and fits with the current reality. Just a little pitch, and I think the EGDF and Spielfabrik and Newzoo would be a perfect trio to make that a reality. And I want to close off with just a closing thought about thinking big. The reality and games are getting more mixed. If your most favorite DJ Solomon, you can see him in Grand Theft Auto every Saturday. Go within the game. Remember, games are the social starting point for a lot of people, and we're doing good with games. This is a game where you can chase and seek wild animals in your city, and the movement of the animals is based on actual wildlife moving around parks in Africa. Super cool. And I'm very happy to see Adidas embracing this and supporting this type of initiative of combining game mechanics in the real world. And if we really want to think big, we look at one of the most successful innovations of games, and that is the fact that they entertain people that don't have money in an equal way as people that do have a lot of money. And in the beginning, that was not the case. Angry Birds was a paid game, so you couldn't play it if you didn't have money. We have changed that. Almost all games are free, but what we had to do is take away the hard currency that one-on-one was related to money. We had to add other currencies that were more related to time to be used in marketing and for people that don't want to spend money to play around with and to earn. over time, actually, most games now have 3, 4, 5 different currencies, very complex economies. And it is a result of hundreds of millions of people playing free games. It is an A/B tested economy. It is not something that is put onto the consumers by games companies. And this is the real world. Our real world has one single currency, apart from maybe some credit systems of gas stations or airlines, has one hard currency. And this is what happens. If people don't have money or don't want to own a lot of money, there is no opportunity for them, and they are left aside. They are not entertained. So perhaps over time, we can take game mechanics into the real world and make a change, and perhaps add a second currency into the world and make life more balanced, make the world more balanced. And I think Europe should be leading that vision and the implementation of that. With that big thought, I hope everybody agrees that something really, really big is going on, and today is a big moment in that. Because I think Tobias said it, we need to think big, and it's up to us.
Yes, we have a couple of time left for questions. So thank you very much for all this inspiring and so much data also. I think we put with this keynote really a clear understanding of where we stand as European and where we are. So we don't have much time. So I think like listening to you, speaking about the gaming ecosystem is a little bit outdated actually. Don't you, should we speak about entertainment, AP, creating industry, or how do we fit into this old ecosystem now?
It's hard. It's the question that I ask myself when thinking about this deeper. Is gaming, is the goal creating IP? Should that be the focus? But it's more complex than that, because it's not like creating a James Bond IP. We're creating live interactive services that requires enormous technology and everything. So it's way more complex than that. So I think the first step is to sort of redefine indeed how we look at the games industry, and do we include things that I had in my presentation, the technology, streaming, esports companies. So I've only really started thinking about it more deeply now, so I don't have a clear answer for you, but I would like to be involved in thinking up if so, how we slightly change the scope of our view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And another question, maybe, because it's also popped up to my mind. We're looking, when we were preparing this talk today with you, together with you, we see really big actors coming into the market massively now with Amazon, Nvidia, and Stadia, and so on. And I see, on the other hand, these small developers and a lot of medium-sized company. And I was asking myself if maybe they would just lose the contact to their communities, because we know this big company is like being like a gateway, and sometimes they just close the door and you do not get access anymore. And one of the big strengths actually of developers is being in the center of their community and knowing. Yeah. So how do you see, I know you're not a magician, so but how do you see this? Is it going to be a big, more business market in the future, or will we keep this contact to our gamers?
Yeah, that's a big question. Again, I'm not, I don't know the truth, but I do always have an opinion. No, I'm not afraid of that. I think it's adding an opportunity for developers to earn some money. I think games are live environments that the subscription company is not going to take over the daily contact with gamers, and well, you're going to get the analytics of the game still to the developer. So I think the fencing off is limited, is not as dramatic as some people think. And at the same time, a lot of developers will simply not go with a subscription business model, see it as an extra add-on perhaps, but they have to own direct relationship with their community. And the smaller you are, the more important it is. Because if you don't have the hundreds of millions of marketing budget like the big guys have, you need to be creative, not only in your game itself, but in how you market it. And you have to create a community on Reddit. You have to actually create tools and competitions for streamers to go out and talk about your game. If you don't have money, we have to use our European creativity and do stuff in the community. So I would not advise small developers to put their game as the only distribution model in the subscriptions, but see it as an extra add-on. It's an extra add-on. I think that's...
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Peter. I really hoped to keep on this discussion also next year, and we will also gather questions from the chat and from the participants. We have a broad audience now, so that we can send it to you. And hopefully we will build this European initiative also further on together next year. Thank you very much for being with us, and see you online soon. Bye.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.